You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Live from Winnipeg, it's Soccer Today, with today's special guest, Lord Bob, or Ben Massey, as he sometimes might be called. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. I need to pick a name and stick to it, apparently.
Apparently, there you go. Ben's in Winnipeg, as I just said, my Saturday Night Live tip of the hat there, to watch the Canadian women's national team play Costa Rica tonight. Apparently, he's also looking for murals of Canadian curling icons. Are you finding any Canadian curling icon murals out there?
I am. Winnipeg, big curling territory, and it's fascinating because they have what I can only describe as an enormous, horrible mural of Team Jennifer Jones painted on the side of a curling club in the Superstore parking lot. So if you're ever in the Winnipeg area...
Yeah. That is possibly the most Western Canada thing I've ever heard in my life, a curling mural on the side of a Superstore parking lot. But anyway, we're going to move on from that. Ben, you're there to watch the Canadian women, as I said. What is the attention to this game in Winnipeg right now? Is there a lot of hype around the game tonight?
I wouldn't say so. I've only been in town since yesterday afternoon, but I haven't seen any advertising, talking to people. I haven't heard any discussion of the game. Compared to what I understand was the situation for the U.S. game that was here a few years ago, it seems a lot more subdued. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. With the CanPL coming to Winnipeg and all, they'll get to see kind of how they handle a routine day instead of a huge marquee event.
Fair enough. And in terms of your own excitement about it, I mean, what are you looking for out of these two games and this game in Duane? Let's look at the games the two of them in general. But what are you hoping to see in the next couple of games?
Well, Costa Rica is a really good opponent, I think, for some of our younger players like Jordan Heidema, Jesse Fleming, to the extent that she still counts, and Deanna Rose. Just because they're a team that's good enough that you have to respect them, and they have a lot of really talented young players themselves. But it's not a tier one team. These aren't games you have to win. So you can kind of let the kids sink or swim a little. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of them get meaningful minutes with starting quality players beside them and hopefully get some experience at game speed.
You mentioned the kids, Lord Bob. Sorry. What we talked about earlier this week is it's fun to see John Herdman treating this Friendlies, like the home and away series, as friendlies and involving new players, having some French players be involved in the discussion, and having those two games. Like, we're very early in a cycle, so you kind of need to try different things, and experiments are going to happen tonight and next week. Do you think it's for the best, and do you think we can maybe discover a player here or there?
I think definitely. I know we've got Shannon Wohler back with the team. She was also with the team in Germany for their Friendlies there a couple of months ago. And she's, I think, 28, I want to say, and she was with the Whitecats W League back when that was a going concern, and she was gone for ages, and now she's back. So if she can be the 2017 José Belanger, then great. And if she can't be, then now's the time to find out.
Speaking of José Belanger, she announced her retirement last week. Lord, you've seen her in many occasions over the last few years. What is your thought on her contribution, especially her last stint, her last go around with the national team that gave her good opportunities professionally in the NWSL with the Orlando Pride.
She was always one of my favorite players, partially for what she did on the field. I mean, she comes up as a striker. She does fairly well for U20s and early with the senior national team. Goes away for years, gets a life, lives an ordinary life in Quebec for years and years, and comes back as a right back and is an integral part of a good team at the World Cup. She was just, you talk about a utility player, you talk about a character presence, and there's always that implication that she never really got it done on the field. Well, Josée Bélanger got it done on the field, but she was still that utility player. She was still that character presence. She was someone you wanted to have around, someone you could throw into any situation. And just having a killer 12th player like that gave us so much. You certainly saw it at the Olympics most recently, when you could just put her on when we needed a goal. You could put her on when we needed to defend that bronze medal lead. And she was equally adept at both. I'm going to miss her a lot.
I think we're all going to miss her a lot. We're all going to miss that entire generation a lot. Back-to-back bronze medals is something that I still sometimes just shake my head at, especially that second one. The second one felt a little bit better in some way. I don't know why it just did, to be able to repeat that and show that they were still there. Then we were both watching games in the 2015 World Cup, 2 years on now, and it's a little early to start talking about legacy, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you see any legacy or an evolving legacy from that World Cup? Has it been successful in terms of inspiration, in terms of driving the game to the next level in your mind so far?
I think you're right when you say that it's a little early, because, I mean, the players who are inspired by that, I mean, Jordyn Huitema is 15, but she was on her way to an elite soccer level before the 2015 Women's World Cup. This is how recently that was. I don't know. I live in Vancouver, which is sort of definitely a women's soccer hotspot. And I do feel like there's a bit more of it's more of a routine thing thinking about high level women's soccer than it used to be. And I think the Women's World Cup gets a lot of credit for that. But the question isn't whether we're talking about it now. The question is whether we're talking about it in 10 years. Right now I feel optimistic, but that's all I can really say.
Yeah, I think it depends on sort of the next level is to get full houses out for games like Costa Rica and things like that. So we'll see how that plays out. Then let's turn our attention a little bit to the NWSL and Canada's involvement in that. We recently saw Caitlin Kyle go through the allocation process, not get picked up by any of the 10 teams in the league. That's very disappointing from a Canadian perspective, I would have to say. Do you feel that right now that the NWSL is doing enough and is giving enough back to Canadian soccer that we shouldn't worry about expanding or creating our own thing, or do you think that we need to sort of look beyond, just like we're doing on the men's side?
I think we definitely need to look beyond. If anything, I think that the opportunity for us on the women's side is greater than on the men's side, because if you look at the men's side with CanPL and so on, it's going to be competing with 3 other professional men's leagues in Canada already, and the player pool for domestic players isn't as deep as it could be. And that doesn't mean the CanPL is not important. That doesn't mean it's not going to do a lot of good, but it faces obstacles that, whereas even just 2 women's teams in the NWSL, or preferably a national Canadian professional women's soccer league, would have access to a great player pool and players on that Caitlin Kyle level who, if she was American, would be playing professionally. She might not still be in the national setup, but she'd be kicking around somewhere. And we've got those players, and we've got the support. We're going to see thousands of fans in Winnipeg today for a Thursday evening friendly against the 4th best team in CONCACAF. Sorry, Mexico. And yeah, I definitely think that there'd be a great opportunity. We always talk about, the NWSL in Vancouver, or, the NWSL Toronto FC should be interested. I always wonder if maybe we should be thinking about the NWSL in a city like Winnipeg, or a city like Victoria, or a city where it would be the number 1 team. And I'm just thinking aloud here, but those are the kind of opportunities I feel we have.
What do you think is the feasibility of it? Do you think we should focus on getting a team? Let's forget about Vancouver, like you say, a team, wherever that team could be in Canada from the NWSL, or should we focus on having a W after that CANPL?
I think that the CANWPL, or however the heck you want to abbreviate that, would be the best of all
getting tough, right?
possible worlds.
It's getting tough acronyms.
Yeah. That's it. In the end, it could be like what we did with MLS. We had Toronto FC join MLS, and we had the Impact and the Whitecaps join later. And we found out the hard way that that wasn't good enough. And so we're starting our own league. And for now, the MLS teams will still be the MLS team, but who knows what it's going to look like 20 years down the line if Canada has a proper soccer pyramid. I think that certainly the best option would be a Canadian National Women's Professional Soccer League. But right now we have next to nothing. Right now we have League One Ontario Women. We have this Quebec Women's League, which, as far as I can tell, exists almost on paper. And we've got a UWS team in Calgary, and we have a WPSL team in Vancouver with another one joining next year. And that's all low to high amateur stuff. And you've got a couple players who used to be in the Canadian national program but aren't anymore kicking around. It's better. It's almost nothing. It's just slightly better than nothing. And if CanPL can sort of push us into semi-professional women's soccer teams in this country, then that'd be a huge contribution.
When you're looking at the landscape of this sport in North America, and especially in Canada, but we'll include North America, Ben, seems to me at least that the growth opportunities left are on the women's side.
Totally agree. I'm being a little extreme here deliberately, but if we took the sort of money that's being rumored for CanPL and the sort of, players make $55,000 a year and we expect to get 6,000 fans a game or whatever, and we said, okay, same thing, but we're spending that on a women's league. That's what we're doing instead. Then I think you could still get 5,000, 6,000 fans a game. The Whitecaps used to for W League, but it would also be the best women's soccer league in the world, because they'd be attracting the best paid women's soccer players in the world. As opposed to CanPL, which is going to start day one, sorry to say it, as the fourth best men's soccer league in Canada. There's definitely a lot more room on the women's side of the ball just because fewer countries take it seriously and there's less money in it.
There's no doubt about that. You see, you're seeing some of those American women move to Europe, Manchester City, into Lyon, and teams like that. Some of the top end American women, and that really comes down to them needing to make that little bit of extra money. And I wonder where the top leagues in the world are going to evolve in the next little while in terms of the women's side of the game. But let's turn our attention to an old warrior of the game that's probably going to be it's probably a little too old to take any advantage of in this country, and that is, of course, the Christine Sinclair, who has seemed to come back around and is having a great year for Portland right now. How do you think that this player can continue to hold on to her dominance and be the face of women's soccer, really, in the country?
Christine Sinclair is always going to be the face of women's soccer in the country. Even when Christine Sinclair is 65 years old and has been retired for the lifetime of the players on the team, Christine Sinclair is going to be the face of women's soccer in this country. She's the Wayne Gretzky of women's soccer. She's always going to be around, and that's the way it should be. Now, can she be the focal point of the senior women's national team? No, but she isn't, and nobody's pretending she is. At the most recent Olympics, she was a very useful supporting player, and that was the role she was put in. I think that the arc of Christine Sinclair's career right now, it's going down, but it's still in a very healthy direction given her age and her fitness issues and her sporadic lower body injuries.
Fair enough, and hopefully we can see her. I have a feeling that she's going to stick around for the whole next cycle. I mean, she's already playing, so why wouldn't you keep going? We are seeing some of that generation retire now, and Diana Matheson's probably the next one to go, unfortunately, which has always been one of my favorite players on that cycle, but her injuries are probably going to take the best of her soon enough. before I'm going to ask you a couple questions on Alphonso Davies and maybe the Canadian Premier League and the show. But before we get that, I want to get your thoughts just in general in terms of what you think is going to happen over these next two games. Are you expecting easy wins by Canada, or do you think that this will be a more competitive series of games than maybe some of us might think?
I mean, Costa Rica's no joke. I sort of alluded to earlier. They've got these great young players like Floriana Villalobos, who's 17 and was at the last Women's World Cup. They've got Melissa Herrera. They've got Raquel Rodriguez. Like, it's not just Shirley Cruz and Prey anymore. And so in that sense, they're a good matchup for Canada and are really good young players like Deanne Rose and Jordan Heidema and Jessie Fleming. I mean, if both teams were giving it everything they had and throwing their best 11s out there and really gunning for it, Canada should win 9 out of 10 of these. It's a friendly. We're both going to be experimenting a little. Odds are a little less good. I expect 2 competitive games. I also expect Canada to get at least 4 out of the 6 points.
Fair enough. All right. I did say to end the interview, I do want to talk a little bit on the men's side, in particular the big news this week about Alphonso Davies being not capped yet, but becoming a Canadian citizen. That's obviously good news. I want to get your thoughts as someone that's in Vancouver, and I know you're not the biggest Whitecaps fan, but you are a Whitecaps observer. Just what you think the feeling for Alphonso Davies is, and whether or not we should be rejoicing this in the way we are, or whether we should be pumping the brakes just a little bit in terms of what we think this kid could do for the program.
I always kind of smile when we worry, oh boy, are we overhyping this young Canadian soccer player? Because what that means is 12 of us getting excited. I mean, this isn't England. A guy like Alphonso Davies, we're all super stoked, but he's not a household name. As for his feeling, I mean, for a 16-year-old, he's just so physically dominant that it sort of views everything off. I'm not sure what to think of him yet. That said, I look forward to finding out. He certainly brings so much excitement to the game, and he has got that physical possessiveness. And he's got the work rate to go with it, which not every Canadian Messi has had historically. So, again, would I bring him to the Gold Cup and captain him? Yes, I would. Would I be expecting him to go 270 minutes in the group stage and score 2 goals? I would not. But, I mean, the stage Canada's at, let's play him. We need to develop some talent. He's a good place to start.
Would you bet on Canada scoring 2 goals in the group stage, let alone 1 player? Sorry, that's too much. Well, what do you expect of the Gold Cup?
I don't expect a lot. It's a rough group. I mean, it's a rough group and it's a rough cycle. And Atiba Hutchinson is doing his usual Gold Cup thing and not bothering to come. And I mean, if we get out of that group, anything else is great. We're not a dark horse. We just want to do respectively right now, as far as I'm concerned.
We're not a dark horse. No, we're not. We're the darkest of dark horses, I think, but nonetheless.
We're the dark
pony in the Kentucky Derby.
There you go. You stole my word. We're the ponies. We're the dark ponies at the Belmont Stake coming up next week.
The donkey, even, really, but that's maybe too cruel. I've been around too long to go down there.
There's some mean-spirited energy right there.
Before we say goodbye, Ben, quick thoughts on that Canadian Premier League announcement and what your overall impression and hope is about the possibility of that league being successful. You've sort of implied a little bit already, but to expand upon that.
I'm a CanPL cynic of many years standing. I want to put that out there because the last few months have been slowly eroding that cynicism. It's just, I know you guys had Paul Byrne on a couple weeks ago, and that was just a great interview because he just said everything I've ever wanted somebody in his position to say. And we finally have people with money and sports experience being publicly associated with this league. And it sounds like they're taking it slow, but they are still moving forward. And I mean, I think it was Paul saying last week, I want to say, that, oh, if we get to 16 teams, we'll be looking at promotion and relegation. And I'm just, yes. You know, they're thinking in exactly the right terms. And I make this big thing of, you know, I want to believe. For years and years, I wanted to believe, and I'm actually starting to believe, and I'm kind of worried this optimism doesn't sit right with me.
It should sit right with voyageurs, with Canadian fans in large. It's normally bit us in the ass, Ben. Apparently, I'm going to be watching a Wolfpack game with you on Saturday, so I learned that the other day. So we'll see you then. But enjoy the game tonight. Anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
Not really. If you like mixed doubles curling, you might want to tune into our women's soccer podcast, 99 Friendship. That's 99 Friendship on Twitter. We do talk about soccer sometimes. I'm sure we will this week.
Yeah, I've actually always wondered whether we should just invite you on the network for a curling podcast, but we'll talk about that another day. All right, Ben Massey or Bob on the Twitters. That there's an underscore in there. So we'll say goodbye. Enjoy the game. We'll see you soon, Ben.
Thank you.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
I think there's more than 12 of us that care.
Well, yeah, just because like 3 years ago when I used to organize Voyageurs parties in Montreal, like 8 shows up doesn't mean that it's the case in 2017, right?
That's true. Speaking of which, I haven't organized one in Toronto today. It usually falls upon me for some reason, but maybe I'll put that out there today. And typically we haven't had great turnouts for the women's games, and that's something that always has sort of confused me because you have so much enthusiasm about the Canadian women in the Olympics and the World Cup. But when you're outside of those events, it's hard to get people to turn out. Hell, even in the World Cup, it's hard to get people to turn out in one place to support them in a unified way. We know that there's so much support out there. It would be nice to see everyone come together and sort of create the community in the same way. We joke, but the Voyageurs have become...
I was just going to say when we joke, but it used to be the only place where you can watch the games because they were not televised. This time around, they will be on TSN and RDS.
Yeah, no, exactly. What I was saying is that, look, the Canadian men over the past few years, the joke aside off the top, the community's growing, and that's just simply because, like-minded people have found each other through the MLS team. So I would just hope that if there are viewing parties out there in Canada today, get off the couch and go out and put yourself out there because it's quite rewarding to watch Canadian games together because, we share the same pain when it comes to the men's side, but when it comes to the women's side, we can share the same glory because they're very good. They won the bronze medal in the Olympics back-to-back years, and that's still, as I said to Ben in the interview, that's still sometimes I shake my head and think about that for a second. That was an incredible accomplishment for a country this size and the amount of resources and the lack of professional opportunities that exist for these women and for players in general. It's amazing that they've won back-to-back bronze medals, and we should get out there and celebrate that.
And let's not forget how they won the second one. Right? Remember the first one? It was kind of a fluke and things had to happen and big teams had to lose at the right moment. In Rio, Canada was full measure, right? Fully deserved bronze medal. Yeah. They beat great teams and they kind of went on a run. So no, I'm still floored. Like it's almost a year now to the day. And I'm surprised of still how Canada played in Rio. Like opening of the tournament, a few seconds in, Fleming scored. Like, wait, what? All right, we're in for a new experience.
Yeah, no, go back and listen to Five Rings. The archives are out there. You can listen to us sort of experience that tournament as it went on, and we were blown away. They became them, and I love the rugby sevens team too. But that was such a quick little sprint. But the women of Rio. Across many sports for Canada were really the darlings for this country, and it was a good little run, and we enjoyed it a great deal. And as I said, London was that nice surprise, whereas Rio was like that. Wow, okay, maybe we are good, and it was a new generation too, kind of evolving, and it was nice to see. So, gonna see a lot of those young players the next two games in Toronto and Winnipeg. If you haven't got your tickets already, by all means, go ahead and get them. There's still lots available here in Toronto, I know for sure. So I suspect that there are some available in Winnipeg as well. So off the couch and get out there. It's a good time, and say hi to anyone wearing a Voyageur scarf because, as I said, the community is we're a bunch of geeks. Really, we're harmless. We'll invite you in. We'll celebrate you, and it'll be a good time had by all.
Yep.
You're not going to get any street greed, but you'll enjoy the geeks that you hang out with.
And Tuesday nights at Saputo,
all right.
Canada, Curacao too. So there's tickets available there as well. And if you are in the region of Laval, they're training again today at the Multiplex Laval fields. So if you want to see the Samuel Pietz, Patrice Bernier, and company get ready for the friendly Calaren too, you can go to Laval to see them train today.
Precisely. All right. Before we say goodbye on the day, we're just going to go a half hour today, and we are off tomorrow. So this is the last show of the week. I suppose what I wanted to talk a little bit about a supporters issue that's emerged out there, and this is one thing that drives me nuts. I wasn't there, so I can't speak with any great authority, but based on all reports and based on basically the press release that was put out by the club itself, the Houston Dynamo's supporters group, the Texan Army, have been they've lost their supporters privileges for 4 games in Dallas. And at one front, if you're out there and you're not in a supporters group and you're listening to this and you're not really concerned about supporters issues, you might not think much of this. But there's something disturbing about it. The reason they've lost it, the justified reason in the release, as I said, is that because they released smoke bombs outside the stadium. Outside the stadium, not inside the stadium. They weren't releasing flares and smoke inside the stadium, outside the stadium. The group itself released a statement today saying that in the guidelines that they signed before they went, there was no indication whatsoever that they weren't allowed to release smoke bombs outside the stadium. They were only permitted inside the stadium. In addition to that, there apparently is an understanding between Dallas and their home supporters groups that they, in fact, can release smoke outside the stadiums. The reason this drives me nuts is there's a great inconsistency when you're dealing with supporters groups in this league in which they want them to be out there and visible and doing things that they then can take photos of and videos of and market, but yet they are so quick and so instantly quick to lay sanctions down on these teams or these groups if, in fact, they do anything whatsoever that they deem whatever, inappropriate in their own way. There's just an inconsistency there as someone who runs in that community a little bit that makes me insane, Kevin.
And there's the rivalry aspect of it as well, where if you're traveling supporters, sometimes you are judged a little bit quicker than if you are at home for the same offenses, or depending of your prior history, or depending of the groups. Some supporters groups can do something and get away with it because they don't have necessarily a mentality or philosophy behind it. Some that do sometimes suffer consequences for the same offense. We have seen over the last 2 years the Montreal Ultras, San Jose Ultras, and other supporters group around the league having bans and having supporters privileges, which usually includes flags, banners, and smoke bombs. Usually flares are prohibited across the board, but slowly in Major League Soccer, we have seen the rise of controlled smoke use by different organization, and depending on the philosophy of the supporters culture, it goes over well in some markets and it won't in some supporters groups, and that's all well and good. Everybody can decide to have the philosophy they want with their group, but where I do see a small problem is when it's because of a rivalry, because, well, it's the other team that did it on our territory, so they're not allowed. So yes, and yes, I know for people on the outside it might be a little petty. It might be just a little, oh, who cares? Just watch the game, take care of. Everybody enjoys their life and their things they love differently. And for some people, the supporters cultures is a thriving force in their life and is one thing that it's their escape. It's the time where they become more than just for them. It's for the group. It's for the club. And taking that away from a group, it's not always fair.
Yeah, look, no one is advocating that the supporters group should be able to, quote unquote, cross the line, however you interpret that. No one is advocating that they should put anyone, themselves included, in danger in a stadium. But I don't know, just be consistent in the rules, guys. The teams and leagues that are out there listening to this, if there's anyone out there, it's infuriating sometimes to, sort of be told one thing and then have something else happen and something else be enforced. And it's so inconsistent across the league. Anyone who's traveled around this league and has dealt with front offices knows how infuriatingly inconsistent it can be. So at any rate, just wanted to put that out there. If you want to read more about that, there's a great thread on Reddit, just the MLS Reddit. If you look for that, so r/MLS, you can learn more about that. There's some stuff out there and Twitter as well. Kevin, before we say goodbye, that's quickly, I'm curious. We're going to move off soccer for a second, end the show here. I'm curious how excited you are by tomorrow and what you're most looking forward to seeing at the Grand Prix.
Well, what I'm looking forward the most is not even the F1 race itself, because of prior engagement, I won't be able to enjoy the entire race itself. But up to the race, I'm pretty much going to be there for everything. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. There's Formula 1600, which is a development class with no downforce. It's very impressive to see Ferrari Sports GT. Tomorrow is going to be a big day, and you can listen to Scuderia F1, a show that we recorded last night, Mark and I, about the Canadian Grand Prix preview, and we will do some coverage from the Circuit de Villeneuve tomorrow. I'll try to get my gear with me and trying to do some reporting from the stands and talk about the Grand Prix. It's something that I have been wanting to experience for a long time, and this year I'm lucky to finally be there in person.
All right. Well, you enjoy that. And as I said a moment ago, we said a couple times this week, we are off on Friday so that Kevin can cover the Grand Prix, can enjoy the Grand Prix in his hometown. We'll be back, obviously, on a Monday next week with a preview of the Canadian Men's Friendly and a review of the two women's games, among other things happening this weekend. But until that time, Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. The show is located at Soccer Today SPN and anywhere, any podcatchers, iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, whatever the podcatcher is. Type in Soccer Today or Sports Podcasting Network, and you will find the on-demand version of the show. Until Monday, as always, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.